Welcome back, folks, to the Director's Garage. I'm your host and resident idiot, Michael. And today, folks, we're going to be doing an in-depth review of the final audio D8000 Pro Edition. And these beauties are kind of an odd bird. There are things that I love about this headphone, and then there are things that kind of had me wondering what the heck I was hearing. And I'm gonna break it all down today. It's a winning sound for sure, but these don't sound like other headphones, to me anyway. And the only reason we got this flagship in-house is because of the fine folks at Audio 46. Of course, Audio 46 has been sending me crazy fun things to unbox for years now, and they can because they have all the best products in personal audio. They are a superstore for all things headphone related, and they give you that personal attention because they're a local business in New York City, and I love it. These guys are friendly and helpful, and here's the cool part. If you use the coupon code at checkout, Director's Garage, all one word, you can knock an extra 5% off most of the gear they carry, like the Estelle & Kern SR35 player, or their Fur Audio Radeon 6 limited edition IEM, or even these final audio D8000s. There's a limited edition making its final curtain call. You can pick them up. They ship fast and free, and give them a call and tell them the Director's Garage sent you.
Come on!
Well, I do get a small portion of the sale to support this channel, and we're not exactly raking it in over here if you've seen any of my episodes, so you're really helping me out. And there's no better place to do business than Audio 46 for all of your headphone-related gear. They are the very, very best at what they do. Now it's time to start digging into this Audio 46 provided D8000 Pro. And I'm going to kick this off with Ergonomics, because I think the ergonomics are generally good, but there are a few issues. Let's start with the good, and that's the looks. Man, check these out. These look and feel like a $4,000 headphone, which is good because the headphone costs, $4,000. The cups are chiseled. These are CNC aluminum, and they are stunning to look at. You feel like these are a chunk of heavy metal. Well, they kind of are, but they don't weigh all that much because these things, as I mentioned, are aluminum. Well done. Now, the pads are a springy foam, and they're covered with kind of a hybrid material of a suede perforated leather on the inside, I think, and then on the outside it's a nylon or silk kind of material, and I think that's good because they breathe. But I actually think memory foam might have been a better choice for the pad themselves, a little better feeling. And the clamp is a little bit strong on these. I thought they were really comfy at the start, but it gets to be a lot during those longer listening sessions. Now the cables terminate in a proprietary 3.5-inch connector. I wish these were generic, but the cable itself, check this out. This is a hefty mother of a cable. Major props there. And I also love the travel case. Great travel case for this. Nice handle on it. I wish more manufacturers did stuff like this with their expensive headphones. As I said, generally good ergonomics, but they are a little on the heavy side and they are a little bit clampy over time. Now, I should also point out the D8000 Pro is quite efficient. It's in the same power need range as the Meze headphones, and that's spectacular if you're looking for something you don't need a big desktop amp to drive. Time to start breaking down the sound, and we're going to start off with imaging, and the image is plenty good on this headphone. I definitely think this headphone images much better than the soundstage. More on that in a second, but it's not in the top tier of imaging like, say, the Sapphire, the LCD5, or the eStats, but it is comfortably in that second tier. Instruments have a pretty solid location and are relatively locked in. Now, things kind of fall apart in the soundstage department, though not entirely. Let me explain. These do have a narrow presentation. There's no question. It's one of the first things I noticed in that sound impression. But there is a fun feature that not all headphones pull off, and it's sort of related to the stage. The instruments have a real three-dimensional sense about them, like you can almost walk behind the instruments themselves, like they're kind of floating. Not far and wide though, which I love to hear in a headphone, but they're close and you can sort of hear around them like they're these chunky emitters of sound. It's a really cool effect, and it gives the D8000 Pro a unique flavor. They don't sound like other headphones. That's a good thing, and it's not easy to pull off. But I gotta call it a mixed bag because these things are really narrow on the soundstage, though I really enjoyed the 3D effect of the instruments. It's very cool and unique. Now, things pick up again when we get to dynamics, that quiet to loud thing. These things have a lot of impact. The dynamics are quite good, and these do slam and extend down low, and that makes the D8000 Pro a ton of fun. Huge win here. Nice physicality to the bass, though the detail isn't exactly crazy. And as I move to detail, we'll start getting into a few of the headphone's weaknesses. Now, to my ears, detail isn't a hallmark of the D8000 Pro. I don't put on a Supertramp or a Steely Dan album and get wasted by the crazy detail. Not to say there isn't detail, it's just not on the level of, say, the Caldera, the Carbon, or the Sapphire. It's kind of mid-pack. These kind of actually sound like a dynamic driver to me, and I believe that if you blindfolded me, I'd probably guess that this planar magnetic is really a dynamic driver. Of course, I'd be wrong, and that's kind of typical of your director, but these have a smoother quality to them, even though the upper treble hints at a bit of speed that the headphone doesn't really deliver evenly. Things like claps and triangles aren't tack sharp, though they do have a nice ring and tone. Realism. How lifelike do instruments sound? Well, these are a pretty colored pair of headphones, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some of my favorite headphones are tremendously colored. The Abyss, the LCD4, and every Meze. Love them. But they ain't referenced, folks, and that's the D8000 Pro. They don't give you that sense of a piano or a horn or a drum in the room like, say, the LCD5 or the Caldera. The D8000 is unique, and as we move into the sound structure, we're going to see more of the same. I'm going to be talking about mids and treble and bass, but we'll mix those up for today. And we're starting with the bass, and there is great bass authority on the D8000 Pro, way down into the sub, maybe a little bit rolled off down there, but it does lack that definition, as I said earlier. So you do get a little bit of muddiness down low, but on genres like rock and metal, you still appreciate that bass boost. This thing's got booty, so the bass is a little bit of a mixed bag, though it's generally quite impressive. Now there's more good and some less good in the mids. Pianos sound quite nice, especially with that 3D stage effect. It's really beautiful. As we climb up through the mids though, there's a recession that happens, and it can give this headphone a bit of a honk on certain tracks. In the upper mids, the D8000 Pro can sound a bit veiled or muted. Now, why do they do this? Well, it makes the headphone smooth out those tracks that sound a little bit grating or bright. It makes the headphone sound generally more pleasing. But on full frequency response songs, these can play a little bit veiled, yet at the same time deliver a pleasant experience. The treble. Well, the lower treble sounds a bit muted and recessed, as I talked about. Then there's a push as we get up into those airier frequencies. So finger snaps and high-pitched snares have a brilliance to lust after, while the lower treble can be a little underrepresented. Generally, the treble is pretty strong on this headphone, though. Time to talk about music, and let's talk about Supertramp, one of the great art rock powerhouse groups of the 1970s. This is a band that ruled the airwaves and conquered the charts in 1979 with Breakfast in America. I love the cleanliness of the instruments and the variety of the sounds that Supertramp employed on their records. The songwriting was inventive and clever, and the whole band were made up of master musicians, much like Steely Dan, as I talked about earlier. Now, I'm choosing Breakfast because it shows off the D8000's strengths and weaknesses equally. Now, Supertramp used a ton of reverb on their tracks, and that reverb sounds splendid on the D8000 Pro, and they employed a ton of stereo tom effects, which the D8000 Pro reproduces brilliantly. Now, Rick Davies and Roger Hodgson's keyboards sound authentic with great presence and nuance through the quieter and louder passages. But one of the things I love about Supertramp is the clarity up top, and the D8000 Pro delivers the upper clarity, but the dip in the lower treble really detracts from the music at times. The bass hits with authority, which I really appreciate, and, bass head. But Supertramp used both electric bass and a synthesized bass at times. Now, the synth bass sounds really great, but the string bass can sound a little bit murky in tone at times. So good and, well, not so good. Nothing ever sounds bad, mind you, but there are times when I feel like I'm missing some of the tonal range. Now, as for the band, well, unfortunately, after the massive success of Breakfast, we get Famous Last Words, a much weaker offering before the big split, and Roger Hodgson would leave the band for a solo career. The two entities would never be the same. The split wasn't due to a rift. Hodgson just wanted some more time with his family and to do his own thing. They reunited for some performances here and there, but Hodgson, well, he never really formally rejoined the band to complete the sound and creativity they once owned in the studio. The whole was greater than the sum of its parts. Hodgson's gentleness was terrifically offset with Davies' grit. Together, they were magic. Apart, things were never quite the same again. Now, next up, I'm going country, and I'm pulling Miranda Lambert and her Grammy-nominated album, Palomino. Now, this album strips the saccharine from Miranda's sound, and it really adds a tasty edge that I don't think I've ever heard from Lambert in the past. This is a road album about traveling the country with a heavier sound and a more aggressive attitude. And what works really well is the image of this album on the D8000 Pro. Lambert and her producer team of John Randall and Luke Dick really fill in the headphone with sensational sounds all over the stage. There are vibrato effects that shimmer between the left and right channels, and they have a thickness to them I particularly enjoy. This album has a bit of stank to it in the best possible way. The D8000 Pro is a particularly good pairing, and the hidden secret of this album is Music City Queen, where the B-52s make a delightful and unexpected appearance. Now I'm going to end the music section with AC/DC. Yeah, I know, I use Back in Black all the time on this show. Get over it. But in this case, I'm going back to the Bon Scott era and Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. And what I love about this album with the D8000 Pro is that this is a drier album with virtually no soundstage at all, and no soundstage happens to be what the D8000 does particularly well. Great crunching guitars, Angus is just perfecting his sound, and Bon's vocals never sounded better. This album is a fun as hell romp, and the D8000 is a great companion for rocking out. I love AC/DC, and this pairing was pure magic. So what is this D8000 Pro Edition? Well, the headphone they most remind me of is my ZMF Atrium. I know, dynamic driver, right? Well, the Atrium is a little more rolled off in those upper area frequencies, but the bass experiences are a bit similar. Though these dig a little bit deeper into that sub, the D8000 Pro is a smooth headphone like the Atrium. There aren't any harsh edges anywhere in the sound, and this is great until you start comparing them to other headphones that have tons of detail and a wide soundstage. And while I do give this headphone a recommendation, I would press you, if you're considering them, to audition the Meze Elite, which I prefer to these, and the Caldera, which I prefer to the Elite. And you can throw a rope around their pricing. They're all fairly close. The soundstage is wider on the Caldera and wider still on the Elite. You may decide that the D8000 bests both of these. I can make a case for it. If you enjoy a thicker sounding bass and you love three-dimensionality to the sound, to those instruments in the soundstage, it's a bit hypnotic. I just would like a little bit more speed in these things. A little detail in the D8000 Pro would really hit the mark. But I love unique sounds, and the reason I can give the D8000 Pro a recommendation is they're really pleasing to listen to, and nothing really sounds like them. As I said, they play a bit like a dynamic, but they have better speed than most dynamics, but not as much speed as the other planers that are in their price range. I'm not a huge fan of the lower treble region. I wish that area was a bit sharper with more presence, but these are definitely ripe for EQing. If you're into that 3D factor of the stage is something no other headphone gives you. And I kind of think that most people who are absolutely in love with this headphone are addicted to that dimensionality. It is a lot of fun to experience. Now let me give you the counter argument with some straight talk, because $4,300 is what the D8000 Pro will set you back. That is a lot of money, and I expect greatness if I'm paying more than $4,000, because this field at the $4,000 price point, it's jam-packed with greatness. When I talk about a headphone like the Caldera, these are headphones that reveal new detail or nuance in the music that I've never picked up before. The Meze offers world-class comfort and great overall sound with tremendous bass. I can't say that the D8000 Pro does anything really on that level. They're enjoyable, and the D8000 Pro is unique, but I'm going to advise you to check out all the headphones in this range that you can before making that much of an outlay. Audeze, ZMF, Dan Clark, Focal, Meze, and Abyss all have entries at or near the price of the D8000 Pro. Just make sure you've heard as many of those headphones as you can before committing. You may land on the D8000 Pro Edition even after hearing all of those others. But there are other headphones like the ZMF Caldera that present better balance and greater speed for less. Yeah, it's a crowded field, and this is a very good headphone, but you can get better performance and greater comfort for lesser cost. So that's the final Audio D8000 Pro. It's a headphone I genuinely appreciate and enjoy. And you can pick these up at audio46.com, link below in the description, and I thank them for sending the D8000 Pro our way. Great company. Now, next up, we're going to go back to the electrostatics for a shootout between this Mullner Audio Alphabet amp and the Headamp Blue Hawaii Special Edition. I'm going to compare how my collection of electrostatics sound on each of these amps. I can't wait to get into that. We also have a long-awaited review of the Dan Clark Audio Expanse. Poor headphones, they just never get their time in the sun, but it's coming. It's a headphone I've spent a lot of time with, and we're going to do a deep dive into the SRX 9000, the stacks that I unboxed in that massive electrostatic episode. How do they stacks up against the Audeze Carbon and Hi-Fi Men Sapphire? You see what I did there? Okay. I know many of you requested that, so subscribe to the Director's Garage so you don't miss any of the incredible gear. We've had a tremendous month around here. It's only going to get better I'm going to see you before you know it.